Yesterday, the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, he sat there like a punching bag, and lawmakers just got to tee off on him. They got to just ask all of their questions. And we learned a whole bunch of different stuff. We've been talking about inflation nonstop. As I said yesterday, inflation is the number one topic in finance right now. Whatever happens with the monetary policy, that is ultimately what's going to drive it. And as you can see from this amazing graphic, Jerome Powell ain't stopping, man. He's just firing off the stimulus, the liquidity. He's going to keep pumping the stock market. Everything is going according to plan. But yesterday, there was a couple of very, very interesting things that he said. First, at one point, he was asked about employment. And the Federal Reserve's been talking a lot about using monetary policy to try to drive us closer to full employment. Back in February of 2020, so last year in February, we were about 3.5% unemployment. That's a historic low in many regards. We today are at 5.9% unemployment. That is down drastically from where we peaked last year in the double digits. But yesterday when asked about it, Jerome Powell said something very interesting. He said, we are at 5.9% unemployment, but quote, and the true number is actually substantially higher than that. Now, wait a second here. Hold on. The head of the Federal Reserve is telling us that the official unemployment number is wrong. The official number is wrong. That's what he just said. He said the true number is substantially higher than that. What is going on? If we can't agree on the actual number, how does anyone make a decision? If you have bad data inputs, you can't make sound decisions. So what is the true unemployment number? Is it 6%, which is only 0.1 off? Is it 16%? Is it 10%? Is it 8%? Is it something else? What is the unemployment number? The chair of the Federal Reserve, who is tasked with making monetary policy decisions based on the data, is telling us that he doesn't believe the data. So why should the rest of us care what the official unemployment number is? If they say it's 5.9%, but the chair of the Federal Reserve says, no, the true number is actually substantially higher. How much higher? Why is that the official number and now there's an unofficial number? What is going on in the world? Now, we may just, when they start talking about official numbers, we should just call them inaccurate numbers. So every time that somebody says, oh, the official unemployment number, what we should say is, no, the inaccurate unemployment number is 5.9%. Why is it inaccurate? Because the real number is much higher. The chair of the Federal Reserve just told us that. What I do find very funny is that they never, ever, ever give an official number where they miss to the upside, meaning, oh, we reported 5.9% unemployment, but we believe it to be lower. It's always that somehow the official numbers are lower than what would actually be the truth, and that's presenting the data in a much more positive light. This is absolutely freaking nonsense. But now that the chair of the Federal Reserve has come out and made it explicitly clear that he does not believe the data, everything he's saying, all the official numbers, he doesn't believe it. He thinks the true number is substantially higher. That leads us to believe, is it just unemployment numbers, or are there other numbers that maybe we shouldn't believe as well? So we've got a chart here of the inflation data. And if we think about inflation, that seems to be a pretty big topic right now. In the red, we have the official CPI number. And that's sitting right around that 4.5% core inflation, 5.4% CPI number. But the blue line is an alternative data set that comes from Shadow Stats. There's plenty of people who try to figure out what's the real inflation number. They're estimating that it's somewhere around 9%. So if the unemployment numbers, the official unemployment numbers are inaccurate and it's the true number is substantially higher, is it possible that the true inflation number is inaccurate or the true number is substantially higher as well? Probably. Is it 8, 9, 10%? I don't know. But they don't know either. And that's the point, is that the Federal Reserve is making monetary policy decisions off inaccurate data. They're now admitting to it. And nobody knows what the real numbers are. So all of this kind of charade that is going on, where Jerome Powell and politicians and the Treasury, everyone is trying to play intellectual. Nobody knows. We're just saying that we don't know. I don't know what the true inflation number is. I don't know what the true unemployment number is, and neither do they. And that scares the hell out of me, and it should scare the hell out of you, that we have people making monetary policy decisions and they don't know the true data. That is absurd. Now, if we go and we look at other things that Jerome Powell said yesterday, I mean, this was literally one of the most comical conferences and kind of questionings that I've seen in a long time. They said, hey, You now are admitting that you don't know what the true unemployment number is. Obviously, inflation is this highly controversial topic. There is a woman, Karen Patru, who I've had on the podcast before, who wrote a recent op-ed. And one of the representatives, I think it was Richie Torres, said, listen, that op-ed suggests that the Federal Reserve is responsible for wealth inequality and is driving wealth inequality. And so when asked about it, here's a couple of the things that Jerome Powell had to say. And brace yourself, because this is absurd. Literally 3 quotes. I don't agree with that assessment. Fine, you disagree. The next, the poor and the working class never came in and said, wow, you should really raise interest rates because you are increasing inequality. And then lastly, literally never hear that from them. So wait a second. Is the sitting chairman of the Federal Reserve suggesting that the Federal Reserve and their monetary policy decisions have zero implications in the wealth inequality gap being widened as they've created all this monetary stimulus? Because poor and working class individuals haven't showed up in their office and told them, hey, you're making the wealth inequality gap wider? These people are unhinged. If you think that they literally believe this, they've never heard somebody in the poor or the working class tell them that their decisions are making their lives worse, and therefore the Federal Reserve must not actually be creating any sort of negative situation. I would laugh at this if it wasn't so arrogant and sad. Now, what's hilarious to me is while all of this is going on, and we have overwhelming data that shows that the Federal Reserve is the greatest driver of wealth inequality in our country through their monetary policy decisions. Stanley Druckenmiller, one of the best investors ever on Wall Street, who's been on CNBC multiple times saying that he believes the Federal Reserve is the greatest driver of wealth inequality over the last decade or so. At the same time all this is happening, Jerome Powell was literally taking a photo shoot for a magazine. This is a photo that Jerome Powell literally took recently. Like, what is going on? We have millions and millions and millions of Americans in this country who literally are worse off now than they were a year ago because of this man and his organization's monetary policy decisions. But he had time to do a photo shoot. Get out of here, right? And then he's got the balls to literally say to representatives when they're questioning him, oh, we have nothing to do with wealth inequality because I never heard a poor portion tell me that we do. There is nothing more elitist than watching a guy in a suit and tie sit there and literally just gaslight an entire country. The man who, by the way, is worth an estimated of at least $50 million or more. He's by far the richest board of governors at the Federal Reserve and has probably profited more than anybody else inside the Federal Reserve due to these policies because most of his assets are actually in investments rather than holding it in cash, is going to gaslight an entire country. It's absurd to listen to this. If that wasn't bad enough, we then had questions around stablecoins. And somebody asked him, if we actually get a digital dollar, what do you think? And he had this to say: you wouldn't need stablecoins and you wouldn't need cryptocurrencies if you had a digital US currency. Now, Jerome Powell is a very intelligent guy. Jerome Powell has had a very successful career on Wall Street in finance before he took over as the Federal Reserve chairman. He also knows exactly what he's saying here. There are 2 problems with the US dollar today. The first is a monetary policy problem where they continue to devalue the currency at a historic rate. The second is a technology problem where literally countries in Africa have better payment infrastructure through mobile banking than we have here in the United States, where the Federal Reserve and the government is working on the FedNow payment system that's supposed to be this really slick thing, but it's not going to be available for years into the future. So we have a monetary policy problem and we have a technology problem. If you digitize the dollar, it only solves the technology problem. You create a better piece of technology. It doesn't address the monetary policy. All you are doing is you're simply putting lipstick on a pig. You're digitizing the technology. What Jerome Powell forgets to mention or is ignorant to is the fact that people are worse off now than they were a year ago because of the monetary policy. Nobody is complaining about the technology. They're talking about cryptocurrencies because of the monetary policy superiority. And so if you digitize the dollar, all you are doing is you're simply making it a little bit cheaper, a little bit faster for payments. That is a evolutionary improvement. It's important. They should do that. That will improve the technology. But the revolutionary improvement, the leap forward, the inflection point in terms of the wealth of a nation comes from the monetary policy improvement. And if you look at a Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of the United States, that is not independent because our government can order them to change the monetary policy. And on top of that, you see things around the lack of predictability. We have no clue what they're going to do in the future. They had 2 emergency rate cuts last year, completely unpredicted. Not only were the decisions unpredictable, but the timing of the decisions were unpredictable. Because that's why they're called emergency rate cuts. So in order to have a central bank that is competent and effective, you need to have 2 key components. You need to be independent, and you need that central bank to be predictable, right? To be dependent, to be reliable. We have neither one of those in the United States today. And so instead, what happens is something like Bitcoin, where it is fully decentralized. There's nothing more independent than a decentralized system that no one owns and no one controls, right? Bitcoin is the most independent central bank in the world. The second thing that it has is it has full predictability. There is no central bank monetary policy in the world that is more predictable than Bitcoin. Why? It's because it's programmatic and transparent. We know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. It's in the code. You can verify it yourself. You don't need a man in a suit and a tie to tell you what he's going to do. And so when we look at the totality of what happened yesterday, I'm worried. I'm legitimately worried if you are sitting in cash. I was already worried, but like now I'm actually scared. And it reaffirmed my belief as to why Bitcoin is going to continue to get adoption, because we have a guy who literally is telling us that the official metrics that he uses to make decisions, he doesn't even believe. He's telling us that he doesn't believe that he has any impact on wealth inequality because a poor person didn't come up to him and tell him. And then if it make it even worse, he then somehow thinks that by changing the technology around his currency, he's going to address the problem of the monetary policy. I literally don't know anymore at this point what they're thinking or how this works, but this is completely unhinged. My favorite part, before we get Joe and John's opinion, is I had to Google today where the Federal Reserve building was. And I pulled it up. And I just have this image in my head of somebody going to this building and asking at the front desk, saying, I would like to speak to Mr. Powell, please. I am a victim of the wealth inequality gap, and I would like to explain to him that his interest rate decisions and his quantitative easing participation has pushed me into a further dire financial position. Do you believe that he is available for a 15-minute meeting today? That's what he wants us to do. He literally is advocating for the fact that the only way that he is going to recognize that he is contributing to the wealth inequality in our country is if you go to his building and you come into his office and you tell him, hey, dude, you keep manipulating the interest rate and it's pushing me further and further into poverty. I live paycheck to paycheck, along with 78% of Americans. 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. You're sitting here and you're just throwing cash around like it's not valuable. Well, you've completely devalued the currency over the last 12 months. Why are you doing this? I know Joe was dying laughing when he heard some of this yesterday.
I was dying laughing at the picture of him that looks like he's in GQ.